What makes a person decide to move self and family thousands of miles to begin a new life in a new land? With us in studio today are two gentlemen from the South Asian nation of Nepal to tell us their story. Murari Suvedi is a professor at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. He's accompanied by his son, Sudip Suvedi, Senior Program Manager at Bissell Home Care in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Feel Like You Belong.
We're glad to be here.
Yes, we are very happy to be here today.
So Murari, tell me, how did you decide to move to the United States, thousands of miles away?
You know, good question. I was a junior lecturer, in a university in Nepal, and U.S. Agency for International Development provided me an opportunity to spend about 3 months' time in Wisconsin, at University of Wisconsin. And when I was studying there, I wanted to visit a couple more states. I selected Michigan State and Cornell in New York. And after visiting these 3 states and visiting the faculty in the university, I returned to Nepal. But then I set a goal that I must do the advanced studies in agriculture development in the United States. These are the best universities. So I came back in 1987 as a doctoral student at Michigan State University.
And how old was Sudip when you came?
I think Sudip was that time 8 years old, am I right, Sudip?
Yes. So what are your memories from those days?
Sure. You know, the things that I remember are probably like playing soccer. I had a typing business. I was kind of entrepreneurial. I had a typing business. I was a paper boy. So I probably remember some of those things when I was young.
Okay. What about the cultural aspect? Because your family moved here speaking Nepali, not behaving in U.S. American ways. Do you have some memories of there being some strangeness about this place?
Sure. Going to school was kind of in the U.S. was kind of a very different concept than kind of school in Nepal. I remember having to adjust to that. I had to learn a whole new language. I knew a little bit of English was one of my 7 subjects that I'd studied through the 3rd grade when I came here, and so I had to kind of relearn all of that.
So was that a struggle for you in school in the early days?
You know, when people are young, it wasn't really perceived that way. I think for 3 or 4 months I struggled. I had English as a second language that I was in from
some classes
January through June. But then by the fall, I was kind of all caught up watching American TV and playing with my friends outside and really getting a hold of the lingo, and I quickly caught up.
Sure. And in some ways you had an advantage because you were really immersed in it and paying attention to your friends, while your dad is actually doing serious, like focusing on his actual subject. You had mentioned earlier that you were at a meeting recently and people are talking technical things, but when they switch the subject to, current culture.
Yes. It is always a learning opportunity, and we studied standard English, standard conversation, standard grammatical rules and others. All these slangs and other, these things are all new to me. And sometimes people say something, I said, I don't know what that means. Still that happens to me.
So you're not necessarily up on current TV culture?
Yes, at that time, absolutely not, in the beginning. And one thing I remember, Sudip coming home from his school, he said he was so happy. Not much homework here in the elementary school. Whereas in Nepal, he was used to carry big bag, lot of homework and exercise. But here, elementary and middle school are very gentle, very light.
So in addition to the homework level, what are the other differences, because now you have kids in the U.S. schools, what are the differences in the cultural approach to education?
Yeah, I mean, they're quite immense. In Nepal, I used to have a tutor, that would come and spend time with me daily. I hear about kids that are learning in China, some of my colleagues for Bissell. The kids are in after-school programs and things. So even at I think in the U.S., probably around middle school, high school is when a lot of the homework and stuff starts to really build up. Whereas in other countries, it kind of starts at 1st, 2nd grade. And even at the very low levels, like I was second boy, meaning that I was the second best in terms of the exams that would be taken. Here, we very rarely, in elementary school, say, okay, you're the first best child, student, second best child. But that happens quite a bit in Asia.
Very competitive and comparing children.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say are the differences between how you are teaching advanced education in Nepal versus your student life at MSU?
Major differences. In Nepal, the professor or the teacher is the one who delivers the pedagogy. The teacher designs.
Very top-down.
Top-down. And the student is supposed to memorize, what the teacher taught. There is less opportunity to be creative, to be problem solving, to be a researcher or inquiry. Those are less emphasized. Whereas here, you just reverse it. The teacher facilitates the classroom. He provides the overall direction. But the student then starts a critical inquiry, how to do problem solving, how to participate.
The pressure is really on your graduate students to become a peer in the inquiry process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In graduate class that I teach, I treat my students as almost like colleagues.
Was that a difficult switch for you to make? Because you came from the Nepali system where it's much more hierarchical, and I understand professors are not equal to graduate students, but they're much closer.
It is a cultural change for myself.
Okay.
Yes.
And also, Alan, in the way of thinking, in business, I can tell you at Bissell, we have a lot of engineers and we have suppliers. If we say, I want X, Y, and Z, they'll go make X, Y, and Z. If I can really articulate exactly what we need. But often, our marketing department or sales, they say, well, we kind of want something like this. We want some options. They really struggle.
Because it's not specific enough.
And also, in their education system and stuff, someone has told them, this is the curriculum, and I'm going to teach you to do this. Whereas and that's why I think the U.S. schools and education system is attractive to a lot of foreign students, is because we teach that way of thinking and creation, and you go and learn what you want to learn about. Whereas they're saying, well, tell me A, B, and C that you want, and I'll get you A, B, and C. Whereas we're saying, hey, go figure out what A and B and C should be, and give me those options. So it's really
more critical thinking, more independent
solving.
thinking, problem solving.
Yes,
absolutely. I want to go back to a minute, just thinking about when Sudip was younger. You had him growing up in your household, speaking Nepali, being Nepali, but outside, it's USA all around.
Yes.
There's McDonald's and Best Buy, etc. How do you keep children grounded so that they stay bilingual and bicultural?
That was probably my wife and I decided.
The mother runs the family. Yeah.
And we thought that it is okay to be good in a school, but don't forget where you come from. Your history, the culture, the language is an essential component of that. So we use Nepali language, at home. So it took them some time maybe to learn English, but they had no problem. We have two boys, Sudip and Sandip. And Sandip was only 2 years old, but he is fluent in Nepali.
And I'll add to that, Alan, my mother was a school teacher in Nepal.
Yeah.
Oh,
so every summer, I remember
advantage.
we had, we call it pat. We had homework to do every day. A lot of my friends were out playing baseball and they're playing home run derby, and I had to do it. And I kind of didn't like it at the time, but now as an adult, I really appreciate the value that language gives me. It allows me to think in a different way. It allows me the ability to learn other languages faster. So really, it started with my mother, Yasoda. And so she did a fabulous job kind of pushing that. But I think even my dad, I came here when I was 8. By the time I went to college, we had probably visited Nepal 3 times. So he made the investment, for someone that was a PhD student and then, was on, kind of the faculty part-time and then eventually full-time faculty. He really invested in us and, and took us back to Nepal because, you have to really immerse yourself. And even now,
And you've
I try
sent
to-
the message, kids, this is important.
Yes,
This is where you come from.
Of
You
course.
need to understand this, and
Yes.
you need to know this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to ask both of you, related to this question, why is it important to be bilingual, bicultural, or multilingual, multicultural in today's international education world and business world?
You know, Alan, thank you for asking this question. I learn few words in about 5 or 6 languages.
Okay.
Like I have some Spanish, some Hindi, the Indian subcontinent dominant language, some Japanese, some Cambodian, and Nepalese. When I go and work, when you say even a word or two in their language, they immediately come closer to you. Oh yeah, here is Dr. Suvedi. He is ours, you know. So learning a language, that is the best way to communicate with that culture.
Sure. It really touches people's heart.
Of course, always it does.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes.
From the business side?
You know, from the business side, it really allows thought leadership. It allows you to innovate. And you might say these are just words. These are just words that you hear that are commonplace. But I'll tell you this classic example. There was a problem where they said, you know, we need to come up with a cup that can hold warm beverages, and you know, people come up with ideas. What can do this? And by the way, it has to be very cheap. You know, so some of the best minds from kind of the U.S. said, you know, I need a cup to hold a warm beverage. I'm going to come up with a coffee mug. Maybe it's a cheaper coffee mug and stuff. And somebody else came up with an idea of a styrofoam cup. Costs less than 5 cents. Also, you can serve a hot beverage in. You know, and so those are the kinds of things that you know, when you have people that have traveled the world and seen different parts of the world or grown up in different parts of the world, they'll approach the same problem with just a very diverse background. So, you know, diversity in culture, diversity in many different ways is kind of essential to having success in the business workplace, where we want to innovate, where we want to be forward thinking and take our companies to the next level. That's where I think the huge value comes from.
Because we're also talking about diversity of exposure.
Yes.
And if you're exposed
Yes.
to multiple
Yes.
inputs, you've got more roads to travel in your pursuit of solutions.
And I think your mind kind of goes through more context that you've been in the past to help you come up with solutions.
And that's awesome. So what would you both like non-immigrants to know about immigrant Americans?
You know, non-immigrants means the native indigenous people who were born and raised here. I think there is a even increasing level of need that they need to understand the value of immigrants, the good things that immigrants bring. Now, they don't bring simply labor force or some capital, but the human resource, the human capital, the experience, the education, the ethics, work ethics. When they come to join. They give up their traditional life, you know, the traditional comfort they used to have. They are willing to take risk. They are willing to work hard. They want to be successful. And these are the people who bring a lot of innovations in this culture, in our society.
Okay.
You know,
Awesome.
so they are good researchers, good doctors, good engineers, good professors, good teachers. So United States of America is like a garden, you know, of 1,000 flowers blossoming together. You know,
With
that
many
is
different colored blossoms.
many different colored blossoms.
Awesome.
So the garden looks much better if you have a variety of, you know, flora and fauna.
Fantastic.
So, Alan, I studied engineering and then I studied business. So I'm going to give you a very practical answer.
Okay.
This man, my father, you know, in the 30 years here that he's been in the U.S., he's probably brought an additional $8 to $15 million of added value to the overall community. He's got 2 sons, my brother and I. My brother's an engineer at Honda. He's designing the new Acura NSX sports car. I'm working as a project manager. I worked in the Defense Department for electronics and so forth. And I worked at Whirlpool and I'm at Bissell. Of his 7 siblings, including himself, 3 are here in the U.S. One of my uncles works at the CDC. His brother is running a business doing construction management, working on a lot of hotels and neighborhoods and things in the part of the U.S. So when my father made that leap of faith to really pack up everything in a suitcase, I kid you not, it was 2 or 3 suitcases that we came to this country in, and really that that willingness to work hard and stuff, it's really impacted. Michigan State's gotten, quite a bit of money in terms of grants and things that he's brought to the university, and also kind of, so when you really look at it, you can look at the tangible and say that there are, dollars, but there's also, look at the enhancement of culture and, our interaction and interaction with other people. So when people immigrate, I think it's amazing what they leave behind in terms of the artifacts and, whether you call it dollars or whether you call it connections and how we bump into one another. There's a lot of value added from immigrants. So that's the real message I want to pass along to people that are non-immigrants.
Awesome. And we were talking earlier about a number of the publications that you have participated in, and we'll share these with our viewers, the URLs and other resources. But these are all representative of projects that you've undertaken overseas. Now, do you take Michigan State students with you on these projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. You asked. These are just on my way here. I look in my bag. These were my just last couple months. I produced this publication. This is for Malawi, the country of Malawi.
So how many Michigan State students otherwise would have no chance to go to Malawi to learn both their technical craft and see a part of the world that's not
you are right.
northern U.S.?
So I have the scholarship that we have done research and outreach work worldwide. I have traveled widely. I have guided students, recruited students from all over the world.
He's probably had over 50 students that he's been a personal advisor to.
I have either advised as an advisor or committee members or in my class. It is a real international community. And Michigan State is so international. I am one of the faculty members providing leadership on international development, mainly on food security and program policy evaluations, And I have projects in Mexico, and I have projects in Malawi or Uganda, India, Nepal, Cambodia, Japan.
So you're really helping the state of Michigan be a gateway to the world.
Of course, exactly. It is a gateway, and this is how we became more, visible to the world. Once we can assist people, you become more powerful. The more you give knowledge, the more powerful you yourself are.
Those connections are really important. We need to wrap up in just a second, but I want to go back to Sudip because you were telling me a very interesting story. Early on, as young people do, they fall in love.
Sure.
But you were straddling two different cultures, and you fell in love with a woman named Elizabeth, who was not from Nepali culture.
Sure.
How did you approach your parents and bring them in on this stranger in your life or their lives?
I met Elizabeth in college, sophomore year, and we kind of got to know one another. And after about a year and a half, I realized that I got along really well with her. She laughed at my silly jokes, and I got along really well with her. And I found that she was somebody that I'd want to have as a partner. And so I broached the topic with my parents, and as immigrant families often wish, and in a lot of cases things work out. They often would like their children to marry, to bring in a daughter-in-law that's of the same culture and background.
Sure.
And I chose differently. At first, it was met with resistance a little bit, but I kind of pursued things. And Elizabeth and I are now married 15 years. We're going to celebrate our 15-year anniversary. We have two wonderful boys, and there was about 8 or 10 kids that I grew up with, I was pretty close with, that are all from Nepali descent. And if metrics are any measure, probably about 2/3 of them did decide to get married, with people of Nepali descent, and unfortunately some of those marriages did not work out. And so I think really it's a story where I found somebody that I got along really well with. My mother and my wife, they get along really well. They both love to cook, and they both love to discuss things. And so it's a fascinating story, but one where over time you learn to kind of accept each other and figure out what's really important to you and go after that.
And remind me, how did you bridge this? Because isn't there a tender way that you actually say, oh, by the way, I'm dating a white girl?
Yeah, no, I think I said I'm dating somebody and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
Usually, Alan, in the beginning, it is always a little shock. Oh, will it work? Human tendency is we try to put ourselves in a box.
Sure.
And then we have a hard time, if you put yourself in a box, hard time to see around, to move around.
Sure.
I think this is US culture, American culture. People are very open, very educated, they have traveled widely, they are hardworking people, some are very open, some are still very conservative. You know, I think our benefit was the family, like Elizabeth, Sudip, they were open, they were educated very well in one of the nicest high schools, a nice multicultural city like East Lansing, they were growing up. And we, family also, Elizabeth's parents and us also, we were educated. We came easily to cross the boundaries, cultural boundaries. Those families and those kind of unions, they succeed, they are sustainable. If you cannot cross those boundary lines, then there is a problem.
Super.
So it is education that opens up these boundaries.
Awesome.
The right kind of exposure.
We're going to have to let it go there because we're out of time.
Yeah.
But it's been a real pleasure having both of you. And I know that dozens and dozens of Michigan State students are glad that you made the decision to bring your family here, and continue success at Bissell and at Michigan State.
Yes, we also appreciate and we are grateful to Michigan State University, a world-class university, research-intensive university that provided me the education and this opportunity. And thank you very much.
Thanks for having us on the show. It's
My
really a
pleasure.
pleasure to be here, Alan.
Then Michael came home one day and said, so, we might have to move again. I said, where? He said, yeah, to the United States.